Everyone says they want to lose weight, but is this really the case? Weight loss and fat loss are often used interchangeably. Weight loss could encompass anything such as the loss of muscle mass, bone, or even water. And the same applies with weight gain. If you've gained weight, people perceive that they suddenly gained fat overnight, which then leads to the slashing of calories and practically starving yourself, or hitting the fuck it button and giving up completely. But this is why that's a terrible idea. Back in 1944, there was something called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, and that investigated the physiological effects of prolonged and severe dietary restriction. Individuals had their calories cut in half overnight, and I bet that sounds familiar. Not to mention, they also had to commit to this for 6 months, and the only food they were allowed to eat were foods that were commonly found in war-torn areas such as potatoes or turnips. Flash forward 6 months later, they were pissed off, irritable, fatigued, and completely lost their libido, which makes complete sense. And of course, they didn't stick to it. If I had to eat 1200 calories a day just to lose a bit of fat, I'd probably be miserable too, let alone doing that for months on end. And it's probably the reason you're struggling to lose fat, because it's simply unsustainable. So why is it when this thing spikes up, you decide to slash your calories in half or hit the fuck it button? And the first part to understanding this question is looking at what actually makes the scales so attractive in the first place. The scales provide an immediate result, informing you is your method working or not. If they're down, it's actually quite satisfying, giving you positive reinforcement to carry on. But if they're up, that means your method may not be working. It feels like you're detracting away from your goals, and you also tell yourself a story about how you're a failure, which makes you feel awful, and then you just end up quitting again. But later you will understand that you're not a failure whatsoever. The scales are incredibly easy to measure. Am I closer to my target weight or not? Compared to assessing on how you feel on a daily basis, or waiting for progress pictures to reflect results. And it's very commonly marketed on social media that losing a certain amount of weight is a win. So if you gain weight, this can make you feel like a failure. But to solely depend upon the scale weight to inform you on your progress is probably not a good idea, and this is why. The number you see on the floor is influenced by numerous factors, and the main one is water retention. For example, depending on the number of carbohydrates you consume will actually lead to how much water you hold within your body. This is because carbohydrates are turned into glycogen, which is then stored in your muscle and liver. Glycogen is something called hydrophilic, meaning water attracting, and for every 1 gram of glycogen, it roughly attracts about 3 grams of water. So if you consume 250 grams of carbs, and that attracts 750 grams of water, you suddenly gained a kilogram of weight. But that doesn't mean it's fat. Another factor is the amount of salt you consume, or specifically sodium. Sodium leads to an increase in water retention because your body wants to maintain homeostasis, basically balance, like normal bodily function. And lastly, it's influenced by the quantity of water you consume on a daily basis. Some days are more, some days are less. Not to mention the water you'll hold within your bladder. And this list here is all of the other factors that influence your scale weight. Now that you know this as well, it's completely irrational to abandon your fat loss goals based on a spike in the scale weight. And it's even less of a smart idea to deliberately influence the scale weight through perhaps drinking less water. That's an unhealthy behavior, and this is coming from experience. So what the fuck do you do then? Here's the solution. From now on, I want you to weigh yourself every morning, post-toilet, fasted, with minimal clothing. And you'll then do this for 7 days, and by the end of the week, you'll have an average weight. In case you didn't know how to calculate average weight, there's a link in the description which will give you access to a Google spreadsheet, and this will do it all for you. Then each week, you can monitor how much weight you've lost, maintained, or gained, and then you can make a logical adjustment based off of this. A little caveat as well, dropping a certain amount of weight on the scales is a huge win, as it probably is indicative of you losing fat, but it's not something to be used in isolation, but in combination with other measurements of progress. Progression photos, body weight measurements, how you feel, how your clothes are fitting. Whenever this bastard thing does spike, you can adopt a logical thought process and think, what might have caused you to gain that weight? Did I have a late dinner? How much water did I drink? Have I gone to the toilet? And so on. It's also very important to remember that weight loss and weight gain is a completely separate process to fat loss. Remember, weight loss encompasses all of them factors, which is then reflected on this scale, relative to fat loss, which is reflected in averages across weeks and months. But a really important thing to remember is to think through this logically, compared to reacting emotionally. You might also have a false belief whereby you can't actually enjoy the foods you love and still lose fat. So in this video here, I ate Domino's for 30 days and lost 6 kilograms in the process.